Okay, I think we've got it. I think we're actually here. Um, oh dear, it's trying to make difficulties for me in the things. Apparently, we aren't actually on. Well, maybe we are. I'll have to check that out to see what Rumble is doing. I mean, this is a little bit more rushed than what I ordinarily like to do. I prefer to have things on time and be going smoothly and all that other good stuff. But sometimes it's just not the way that things really go. Oh, and amongst other things I'm trying to do. That's upcoming. So as it finishes processing. Okay. Yeah, forgive forgive all of my various technical difficulties. It's being somewhat difficult, but let's see. Custom, okay. You got that. Okay, it's new to me having to let's see. Okay. All right, let's see if that does the trick. Okay. Oh, thank you for bearing with me. Okay, according to that, it appears to be working well. Now I know I just need to go through a few extra steps when I do the stuff here. So, very good. Very, very good. Okay, I'm just going to continue spreading the link around that give people to pop in on everything. Let's see. Probably need to go to my content. Okay. Let's try that. Alrighty, so I don't know that things are going to be all that smooth on the Rumble side of things because I know their servers sometimes have their, but you know what? We are working with it. I don't know that things are going to be all that smooth. Yeah, we can hear me there. Rumble side. Alrighty. Let me update the link there because my goodness, this is a bit more complicated than it is on ordinary occasions. But we are going to get through it because I want to see if I can make the Rumble and the YouTube streams work together in concert at the same time. The reason being is that on the occasions when I want to discuss topics where it's YouTube safe, essentially, I also want to start getting into the habit of streaming to Rumble because, for one, I now have the capacity to do so. And for two, I do suspect that is going to be very much the wave of the future, things being what they are on YouTube. I don't know if you've heard about YouTube's latest sins, but yesterday, I woke up to a video from the Lotus Eaters. It was Carl Benjamin speaking. So you might know him as Sargon of Akkad. And apparently, they had been demonetized. And from what they could ascertain from YouTube, it wasn't even with them or their account that was somehow linked with theirs or associated with theirs. But otherwise, I guess they just didn't like the company that the Lotus Eaters were keeping. And as a consequence, they demonetized the Lotus Eaters. And when they've tried to appeal and do other things, all they get is messages from YouTube saying, you can always make adjustments to your content to overcome this issue and reapply for the monetization. Neat little trick that. You see, you don't have to actually be guilty of violating any of their rules. You can follow their rules, but these nasty platforms, they can find a reason to get rid of you anyway. And that's really what's been on my mind a lot lately because, all of these rules and the way they go out their ideological opposition, of which I'm a very small part. But these tech platforms, they their rules aren't really about having things run smoothly. They're not saying this is the way we would like things to go on our platform, and as long as you're within those bounds, everything is all right and everybody's cool. That's not what it's about. They're trying to make rules increasingly difficult for anyone who disagrees them to operate on those platforms because, of course, the goal is silencing. And I have to admit, this does make me a little. I mean, if I'm going to, I'd rather be hung for a lamb rather than a lamb. So in a way, in some ways I am getting less careful, just because there's going to come a point where they're not going to care if your content is within the bounds of their rules. They're not going to care. They just want people who disagree with them to go away, to be quiet, to not be part of the public conversation. I mean, because it doesn't go along with their goals, whatever their goals happen to be. And so I'm just, why bother? Why are we jumping through these hoops? I mean, there's a reason why someone like Steven Crowder has, his dump YouTube feed button that he clicks during his live streams. There's a reason why, increasingly, uh, he's having to hit that button pretty often, because once people get in the habit of being able to actually say what they think, why put up with anything else? I mean, doesn't that seem like a pretty reasonable question of, if we can speak our minds at one place, why do we have to go through all of these gymnastics, these linguistic and saying in order to beat the algorithm and the censorship? Why should we go through all that effort when we have alternatives? And these alternatives are getting increasingly viable. And I think that's another to really focus upon. We are not as trapped as what we used to be, and I think that's worth considering. And of course, Rumble, it's not quite up to par to YouTube just yet. It doesn't have all the functionality I would like. For one thing, my beloved playlist, I like keeping things organized. As anyone who's part of the Gilded group will know, I like to be able to know where information is and to be able to retrieve it like that if I want to. Well, Rumble, that's not exactly available to me at the moment, but the more people get on it and the more they feel that push, and the more it's financially viable for them to continue to make improvements, to make more tools available, to expand the level of their service. The more they do that, well, the more we all benefit as a whole. And of course, Rumble is a place where someone like me actually has an opportunity to maybe earn a little money down the road, just through their advertising, because they allow people to be eligible for that, whether they're a very small channel or whether they are a very large channel with a thriving community. Either way, that's not something that's available through YouTube, to say nothing of I'm getting kind of sick of having to mind my tongue on YouTube. And only this morning, there was a meme that one of the members wanted to share inside of the Gilded group, but he stopped himself because Gilded has, some rather Byzantine rules, like Discord did, and he's very concerned about us running foul for them. And I'm like, I get it, I really do. But on the other hand, I don't really think that the issue is about whether or not we've broken any of the rules of these platforms. It's just they do not like people who think and believe the way that we do. Not politically, some of them perhaps not religiously. They just don't want us to be around. So I don't think it's going to matter how quiet we walk. I mean, it's like someone who's been in an abusive relationship. Uh, it doesn't matter how much you do what the abuser says. It doesn't matter how you contort yourself to try to accommodate them. None of that matters, because at the end of the day, they will find an excuse to hit you. They will find an excuse to beat up on you. And that's very much what everyone really has been experiencing from these platforms. They are going to find an excuse to beat up on you. So I think it's time for us to just say what we're going to say. Now, in the event there's any unpleasantness, and for whatever reason we do lose our Gilded group, I'm not anticipating any trouble. But to be honest, I didn't anticipate trouble from Discord either. But here we are. So I did go ahead, and I do have some backup arrangements. I'll just put it up on the screen right now. Okay. Do cooperate. Why is that not? Okay. There we go. This is from a platform called Element. I was finding it when I was looking for alternatives to Discord and Gilded, just in case. It likes its encryption. It does its stuff. My one complaint about it is that it does have a lack of functionality. For instance, on the Gilded server, there's a lot of different kinds of channels I can create. It allows me to make a differentiation between channels that are meant to be informational resources and things that are meant to be for general conversation. Well, on Element, it's just kind of a free for all. There's only one kind of channel. Well, they call them rooms, but they're channels. There's only one kind of channel you can create. And I thought, if it came to it and we had to flee there, I'm just going to keep it very simple. So as you are able to see, I have one channel called Chit Chat that's just for general visiting. I have the next called the Newsroom, which is pretty self-explanatory, and the rest is for pagan content. That would be anything, whether it's memes or you're wanting to start a discussion on some pagan topic, or if it's an article or a blog or a video, whatever it is, music, arts and crafts that are specifically pagan in nature, that's where you would put it. And we wouldn't really have an easy access way to look up past information that had been shared. And yeah, that's what we would do. And that's just the way that it would go. Hoping it doesn't go that way, but just in case, that is something that is available to us. We do have a place to flee. I am very much prejudiced in favors of alternative platforms in which real-time back and forth conversations via chat room are able to take place. I'm in favor of things that have a voice and video capability, like what Gilded and Discord have, because it makes for a more personable experience in these group discussions. And so Element does have that. So worst coming to worst, we have a place to go, and we can make do. We can make do and mend. We really can. But again, I'm hoping it doesn't go that far, just because I would miss some of the functionality of Gilded. But that is what it is. I mean, we are living in the world that we're living in. And as far as platforms like Gab or other places where you can form groups, I really don't see those as being at all compatible with the mission of Blackbird's Brew, because it's all about community building, and that's not really what goes on in those places. They aren't really building community. They're not really doing much of anything, to be perfectly frank with you. It's a place for people to shout out their opinions, throw hissy fits in public about whatever it is that's bothering them in the world, shout it at the wind, and then they just disappear. There isn't really exchanges. There aren't real-time conversations, and those platforms simply don't lend themselves to it. And I think it really encourages a spectator's approach to human relationships, and we don't need any more of that. So under no circumstances will I be indulging and groups of that kind, just because they don't serve the purpose. And hello to Miss Amanda, glad that you're here. No notification. Yeah, I figured that we're not going to see much of notifications in the way of those of us who are unpopular with the regime. Very glad that you're here and that you made it. I was just telling the people a little bit about my anti-censorship measures. I have that server on Element already done, and I've sent out. Now, in order to join the Element group, you actually have to send out email invites. So I guess that's one way of separating the wheat from the chaff, because in order to join, you would have to contact me. You would have to give me your email, and I would have to send it out through there. I do already have Amanda and Georgia, their email invitations have been sent, so they'll be able to set that up at their leisure. So if we have to flee to Element, there'll be 3 people already there and established. And it's nice to have the backup, but again, this is strictly backup. This is worst case scenario. And hopefully, as things go on and people realize that, this censorship, it really isn't going away. It really, really is not. I hope that will inspire creators to start doing a little bit more and creating their own products to where we can do these things, and where people can operate with, a reasonable degree of confidence, because it's simply ridiculous what's been going on. I don't know if anyone watching this stream happened to catch Timcast last night. Well, they were in the middle of a conversation. It was about that shooting tragedy. And because of the nature of the conversation, it was impossible to talk around the issues and remained YouTube safe. And so when the stream just went poof, I thought, oh gods, YouTube struck again, and we don't need this. But apparently Georgia informed me of this. She got to hear that it was Tim himself who dumped the stream, just because he was afraid of YouTube giving them the axe. So they went off to the timcast.com website and carried on there. And I can't really blame them, as frustrating as that was to be cut off, mid-conversation, mid-sentence even. I understand why he did it, because we can't rely on YouTube. And again, they don't care about their rules. They don't care whether you're following your rules. They don't care if you have good intentions. They don't care if you're having an honest conversation about difficult topics. They just care if they think that you are ultimately against them and they want to keep you quiet. So, I mean, that's why everyone is fleeing to all of these other alternatives. And if you are out there in the pagan community and you happen to have some skills with making a web page, I would love to have a conversation with you. I want to know, how much would that actually cost for the kind of things that I would envision. That way I would at least have a workable figure to where I could see, is this something that would be feasible? What would need to happen in order for that to be created? Just because I don't really give the rest of us 5 minutes. I mean, that new CEO of YouTube, everyone said that he was worse than the woman before him. And I think we are starting to feel the effects of that. So not much to be done. And of course, if I run out of platforms to nestle in the group, well, hopefully by that time I will have made the case about the need to start creating community. And if I am banned from all these platforms, maybe someone else who isn't been banned, maybe that will inspire them to start trying to create their own online pagan communities through some mechanism. Find something that suits them, something that suits their goals and what they think creating community is really all about. And hopefully this will also lead to us trying to reach out to other people in the waking world, because ultimately that is what it's all about. I mean, it's all well and good to come together over the internet, but it would be much more convenient if you could actually associate with people, who are all in the same town. That is where we need to get eventually. And if this is helping us train ourselves to get to that point where we're willing to just say screw it. The worst thing that can happen is that I find out I don't get along with someone. The worst thing that can happen is that other pagans in the area, might say no, they're not interested. And if that's the worst, okay. But try to lay the groundwork, lay some seeds, and we'll hang on online as long as we can. But there's so much in flux. I think. Well, I don't think there's an immediate danger of anything particularly cataclysmic. I mean, there's no harm in being prepared. And honestly, by sending these signals to these big tech platforms of saying, look, I just can't work with you. I know you just want me to shut up. And I know you want a lot of other people, who have much bigger channels, who have proper followings and bring people to their site, who actually absorb their advertising. I know you don't want them there either. And so if we could send them a signal of, look, I'm not going to conform to you and you've become unusable. And so I'm going to go prop up all of these other sites. There's a reason why Rumble has been absolutely exploding. Next to Rumble, I think Odyssey is, I guess, the next best option. BitChute is, I don't really like it, but I'm there, and it provides a lifeline for people if they're looking for it. And that's the other thing. I think we're going to learn probably the hard way why it's so important to be proactive. If you want something, don't wait for someone else to make that for you. Go out there and create it for yourself. Figure out how it's done. And yes, I mean, it might be uncomfortable for you, might be forced to grow, but I mean, let's be real. Most growth is in response to external stimuli. And we're getting a lot of external stimuli saying that if we want to carry on and exist and live our lives in the manner in which we see fit, we're going to have to be very proactive indeed. And we're going to have to stop really cooperating with other sorts of people. And I'll not get too distracted. In reference to the recent tragedy that took place with that horrific school shooting, that is a subject that I am going to be talking about. I know George is planning to talk about it. Look for those efforts later on in the week. I'm not sure when George is going to be doing hers. I don't know if she'll be doing live or what she'll be doing. But the wheels are turning in hers, and she's going to be looking at more of the political end of this. I'm going to be looking at that whole tragedy and everything that feeds into it from a more spiritual perspective, because I think it's important to also take that into account when we talk about these issues and really the ramification for some of these ideologies and the consequences for people when they start to playing Frankenstein on themselves. But of course, that can't be done on YouTube. So I will mention that it is happening, but it's going to happen on Rumble. Look for that on a Thursday. Yeah, fun times, fun times. I don't know what else to do, gang, except continue to look for more alternatives. Just keep plowing through, keep going forward, doing what I have to do, and trying to make sure that the content that I've been creating, whether it's for educational purposes or it's, sending out challenges to my community. Let's talk about this. Let's make our conversations, a little bit deeper, a little bit broader, and a lot less about, comparing research notes. I mean, that's all very well and good. That has its place, but it's how you apply that information in your day-to-day life that actually counts. It's how you're practicing your faith on the daily that actually counts. I mean, I don't think that our ancestors were caught up in some of the debates that we were. And maybe that wasn't the time for it. And maybe this is the time for some of those debates to happen. But when it comes to the nuts and bolts of living a daily pagan life, it's not operating on that level. It is all about the application of principles. It's about allowing our stories and our lore to really inspire us and to inform our worldview and how we interact with it. That's really what it's all about. Oh, that reminds me, let me see if I can actually pull this up, because there was an article that was shared in the group lately. There it is. Okay. It was shared by the member Azamutu. Azamutu, I don't know if you're watching the stream, but shout out. I don't want to steal your thunder, but this was too good of a thing not to share. It was an article. It was, let's see, let me bring it up. Aha, okay. Let's see. Aha. So this comes from Substack via Thomas Sheridan. It was Azamutu who shared it to the group, and he was asking the question about how pagan is modern Nordic paganism. And he had an interesting observation. He was talking about, the darkness or the seriousness or, the stoicism to the point of, is it necessary to be quite that stoic? He had the theory that more of that was rooted in Lutheran Protestantism, and that general attitude kind of took the joy, the vivaciousness, and the range of human emotion out of Germanic and Nordic culture. Now, I don't know very much about the Lutheran Church, apart from what I encountered when I was Jehovah's Witness, going door knocking in a town in Missouri called Concordia. I swear it was more German than Germany. And everyone there was Lutheran. And those who were not Lutheran, I tell you what, they absolutely kept it to themselves. And my great uncle Lloyd, whenever he had to go up that way, he always described them, I don't want to talk to those sour old Lutherans. So there is certainly an atmosphere of seriousness there. And one thing that Thomas Sheridan was observing is that, before Lutheranism, before the Christian conversion came to any of these cultures, that the societies were quite different. It wasn't quite so puritanical. Sorry, Amanda, they're talking using that in the pejorative sense. My apologies. But they weren't quite so constantly serious, quite so rigid. There was a time for seriousness. There was a time to be really very rigid and resolute. And then there was the rest of life where, it was calmer. It was more relaxed. It was more day to day. And he also thinks this may have affected even cultural aesthetics, how, the manner of people's dress, different patterns, because I've seen some traditional Scandinavian and Germanic costume, and it was really very, very colorful, very lively. And that makes a lot of sense to me because, as you know, the further north you go, the less light you tend to have, and the earlier that darkness of the evening tends to come. And of course, during winter, that can get very, very bleak. So it makes sense to me. It seems very intuitive that it would be a society more inclined, to dyeing their clothes, to using colorful embroidery when they could, painting their buildings, even things of that nature. So far as resources would allow, it made sense because, when you are, in that much of the dark, or when you're in that much, kind of doom and gloom, you start to really crave bright colors. So that makes sense to me. So the fact that, that changed, I mean, that could have been the Lutheran influence, or because there was a period of time when, even in the pre-Lutheran days, when the church just got really very, very, I'm very buttoned up, very dour, very, very, very cranky. Really makes you wonder what was going on with that. And so, that would be something that isn't really representative or consistent with what the pagan culture was, or what it is that we're trying to resurrect. But I also think that kind of seriousness that isn't necessarily the only factor at play. I mean, there's a lot of different things. I mean, I'm sure that that undercurrent does play a role. I'm not dismissing or disputing that part of his theory, but I don't think that it is just this one cause and that's the explanation and that's just the way that it is. I think it's a little bit more complicated. For one, I do think that you do have to look at the climate. Survival is very serious business, especially in the northern climes. There are things that you need to do when it's the time to do them, whether or not you feel like it. Whereas if you live in a more moderate climate, and there's a longer growing season and you have greater variety of crops you can grow. You have more options. It's easier to keep the animals alive. It's easier to do a lot of things. There isn't as much of a let's get right down to business and take care of these necessary things because their climate does not force people to do that. That's one thing that can account for different cultures. And of course, that would be reflected, when you are in rougher terrain or more difficult terrain, or if you are in places where you tend to have very, very long winters and very, very short growing seasons. I think that could definitely account for some of the seriousness there. But even within that seriousness, I can see how a more cranky version of religion might, kind of tap down on one's joie de vivre. But another thing is that we have to recall that in our pagan revival, we are also experiencing people going through kind of an existential crisis. They are asking questions of who am I? What really should I be? What does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a man? And of course, after so many decades of people preaching passivity and nonviolence as just the ultimate virtue, it's only natural that you see that pendulum swing back and men saying, no, we are protectors. We were meant to be warriors. We were meant to meet violent threats with equal violence if that's what the situation called for. And so I do think that does lend to a resurgence of a more warrior kind of culture. And of course, to be a warrior, to be facing battles, whether it is the literal kind or something more metaphorical, that certainly does require a more serious mindset, something that is a little bit no nonsense, very self-disciplined. So I think that also feeds into it because I think a lot of men are desperately trying to reclaim their masculinity. And eventually that'll balance out into a more reasonable state of affairs. At least I think that it will over the long run. But for right now, it's just, I think we are feeling our way through. And I think that does absolutely feed into the seriousness. And then the other thing is that some people, I think they have the mistaken idea that if they are very serious and very glum and very grr, you don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do it type of attitude. I think that they have the mistaken impression that the rest of us believe that makes them tough, or that they are someone to be taken seriously, or that they know what they're about. Personally, I don't buy it. That kind of performative aggression. You might meet someone who actually follows through with it, or you might meet someone who is desperately trying to project that image because they don't actually have that kind of strength really built up from within themselves. And of course, some people think that it's cool to be like that, or that they gain some kind of clout. And again, I think that it has more to do with our own issues in our own era rather than necessarily something that occurred hundreds of years ago. I mean, there could be some seeds of that set the stage and made it more likely. But on the other hand, I don't think that really tells the whole story. So there's that. And there was another article that was shared to the group recently. I want to see real quick if it did. This one was shared. Oh no, wait a minute. Maybe I didn't save that. Huh. Oh, no. Oh dear, that's unfortunate. Well, I was going to share an article that was shared to the group by Druid Fox. It had to do with an examination of the root word that essentially is now being translated into virtue, and how the idea of living a virtuous life, living a good life, and really paying attention to the content of your character and the quality of your deeds was very much rooted in ancient pagan societies. But apparently their WordPress got nuked. I think it's because they had the temerity to use the word folk in the name of their blog. Isn't that interesting how every non-European culture in the world is permitted to have a folk. They are permitted to consider themselves to be part of a people, to have a cultural identity, and for that to be something that, it is for them to keep and protect and promote and to continue to pass on to continuous generations. But anything European or that even smacks of European extraction, if there's a referencing of folk, why, that must be an expression of evil. And I, for one, am getting very, very tired of it. I am so sick of this. I am so sick of people buying into this nonsense that the amount of melanin in your skin or the lack thereof, it somehow says something about who you are as a human being. I'm very sick of the idea that because of the actions of a maniac in Europe during the 1940s, that somehow invalidates everyone of European descent as, from having any right to claim that they have a culture, that they come from a people, that they have roots of any kind, and that maybe there are aspects of their culture that are well worth preserving. I am so sick of that narrative. And as for our issues in the United States when it comes to race and ethnicity and religion, all this other crap, it antagonizes me so much. Because if anything, we should have the richest culture in the world, because all you really have to do to qualify as an American is to plant your roots here, to really believe in the values and virtues of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, and you have the cultural mindset of an American, and then you live it. And that doesn't mean that you had to throw all of the rest of your heritage you came from your ancestors away. No, you just incorporate into it. You realize that you're taking these things into a society where not everyone has to do exactly the same thing. We should be absolutely awesome. And look how hard people are having to work in order to get rid of that. I mean, it's astonishing what the Marxists have done in the last 100 years. And it's absolutely amazing. Well, I guess it's more than 100 years now, because they really got their in with Wilson, didn't they? Little charmer there. Ever looked at his personal views? Very interesting stuff. Nasty stuff. Not the kind of person that I would personally choose to associate with. But you know what? That's just me. But for years, decades, he was just absolute leftist icon. It's amazing the kind of people some of these leftists will actually promote. But then again, all of their ideas and everything, it's not really based on anything that's real or true. It's not based on any kind of overarching theology. Oh, no, 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 no. It is the cult of the current thing. I've really been converted to that particular viewpoint. Whatever is going, whatever they're getting social pressure for, whatever the internet is telling them they ought to be in order to not be canceled, why, that's what they're going to promote. It doesn't matter if it contradicts anything else. It doesn't matter if they don't have a rational explanation. None of that matters. Because if you're challenged, you just respond with how hurt your feelings are. Yeah. Just hurt your feelings, and somehow that invalidates something that someone else does. And it is a real challenge for people who actually do believe in logic and reason and their value, and they use that as a means to navigate the world. Dealing with people who reject that from the get-go, I mean, it's absolutely impossible. I mean, I know people keep saying, oh, you can't have national divorce, you can't split up the United States, this and this and that. I'm saying, buddy, we better start figuring out a way how to do that, because we are on a very, very nasty path right now, a path that is going to be horrible for a lot of people. And we are seeing it. And that whole business with Antifa getting rowdy in Georgia. Yeah, that's called domestic terrorism. That's what that actually is. And isn't it interesting that Antifa still hasn't really been labeled as a domestic terrorist group, or that they haven't been identified as someone who's simply wanting to destroy the very fabric of the United States, from our government to our religious institutions to our cultural, imperatives, all of that. They just want all of it gone, and they want to replace it. I mean, how many times are we going to have to play this game where an ideology that comes in with a specific goal of, I want to replace everything that you have, everything that you are, everything that you built, and I want to replace it with this? How many times do we have to hear that before we realize that that ideology is the enemy of our own, and that we need to treat it accordingly? And it isn't just a different opinion, because people who have different opinions can still live in the same country. People who have different opinions, don't have issues breathing the same oxygen. It's only when one person says, yeah, your way of doing things and thinking and being, that has to go. That has to go, or else. First, I will shame you, and then I will start picking on you and harassing you. And then finally, I'm going to have to remove you from the equation. Let's see. Amanda, you're going to love my thesis work on Thick as a Brick then. Excellent. I am looking forward to that. You go in deep with your song lyrics, and not only do you really need to finish it, as you just say, I think I'm going to start nagging you to finish it. I think I'll start every conversation with Amanda. Hello, how are you? How's your thesis on Thick as a Brick going? How's it coming? Have you worked on it? Yeah, I think I'll just start nagging you. And eventually the aggravation of the nagging will reach to such a point that you'll have no choice but to pick up your pen and finish that off. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to aggravate you. Much appreciated. You need the prod. Yeah, I hear you. And that's really what coming together as a group and as a people is really all about, is that we can give each other those prods. We can tell someone, that idea for your project is really great. When are we going to see results? And you can keep push, and finally someone is actually able to accumulate the energy to actually get that done. It's really, really valuable. Oh, well, I have been rambling for 35 minutes. I don't really have a whole lot else on my brain. I'm really sad that link that Drew had shared is now defunct, because it was a really great article. And why are so many people so hell-bent on trying to portray paganism as this kind of mindless hedonism, as just this nihilistic, I need to have as much fun as I can before I die, and nothing matters, there are no standards. That isn't paganism. It never was. Their societies wouldn't have lasted for 5 minutes if they had carried on like that. Even when we look at, perhaps practices that would seem excessive or out of place today, there was a time and place for that. There was some regulation on even, some of their wildest things that they did, except the Romans, once the empire went into decline. That is just societal decay. And the reason why it was societal decay is because people had absolutely no moral restraint. They had ceased to be Roman in the true sense. And honestly, I think today we are facing people who have ceased to be American. People have ceased to be a lot of different things. And of course, no one is really examining the question of what comes next. They're not asking, what is all this going to be replaced by? They just think, okay, I'll get this out and we'll stop doing that and we'll get rid of this tradition and that'll be just fine. Well, nature abhors a vacuum, doesn't it? You get rid of something, you will find something else grows up in its place. Even Nietzsche said, we have killed God, he is dead. What now? Essentially, you have to become that which you have just destroyed, or you replace it with something, and it will be replaced. And we see this all the time. People, they reject maybe the way they were brought up. And the people who don't really take on the big questions and introspect and ask themselves, okay, what is the meaning of life? What is my purpose for being here? What is it I want to accomplish while I'm alive? People who don't take that on, they find themselves very susceptible to strong personalities, to ideologies, to anything that essentially replaces that. That actually happened to my cousin. She's an ex-JW, and she didn't really fill up her brain with anything worthwhile. And so now she's a leftist. Doesn't even talk to me now because, our worldview is so disparate right down to the molecular level. So instead of having a relative who was willing to be on speaking terms with her, she threw that away for leftist ideology, just as the Jehovah's Witness relatives are quite willing to forgo relationships with those who leave that particular religion. Same issue, different masters. And this happens in civil society as well. People have rejected, by and large, a lot of American precepts, but what did they replace them with? Well, they didn't think about how the world should actually function, or what reforms would be needed, or what they think society should be based on. Instead, they just kind of fell in with leftists, and they were on the internet too much, and now they are absolutely out of their minds. It's a clear progression of events as far as I'm concerned. It's the exact same issue, just slightly different remedies. So that's something to think about. And Amanda, that's very kind. Thank you very much. Amanda writes, you're a fabulous motivator and your rambling never change. I hope so. I hope I'm doing some good for somebody. I will keep at it as long as I have access to the internet. And I suppose if that really goes, well, then I guess the writing of a book that I've been putting off for, I don't know, ages and ages. I guess I'll start doing that. One way or the other, the only way to really make me stop from speaking out and using whatever tools that I really have at my disposal is, you're going to have to remove me from the planet. You can limit my reach, you can make my life hard, but you can't make me stop. And you can't make me give lip service to these ideologies that I find to be absolutely abhorrent. You cannot make me do it. It reminds me of that story of this. I was a singer. I think she was in Austria during the Nazi era. They tried to force her to sing, and she said, "You can make me scream, but you cannot make me sing." And that kind of resolute, I cannot be conquered. You could hurt me, you could kill me, but you cannot conquer me. You cannot defeat me. We need that kind of courage. We need that kind of resoluteness. And gentlemen, we really need you to fully reclaim your masculinity and stand up and provide some leadership. Society absolutely cannot be carried on solely through the efforts of women. We are a binary system for a reason. We have our different strengths and weaknesses that we bring to the table, and we have the best chance of success when we work together as a team, and in whatever context that happens to be. So yeah, my pagan brothers, I really need you to be more vocal. I really need you to come to the table and do what needs to be done and show the human side of paganism. And why should we let our image be decided by leftists who could not quote you a verse from the Havamal, could not explain any kind of pagan principle, who could not explain to you how the most basic of spells work? Why should they define us with their outlandish hair colors and their eccentric dress and their pronouns and everything else? Why should they be in charge of defining us in any way? I don't think that they should. Hopefully you don't think that they should either. Oh, and hopefully you'll join me in the fight, because I'm telling you right now, this is the battlefront of information, the battlefront of all of these platforms. And we do need to start building up strongholds. I mean, we do not have a proper foothold in the enemy territory, so to speak, of YouTube or Facebook or all of these other places. We do not have a secure foothold, but we can create strongholds on free speech platforms. We can start it with Rumble. We can do these things. We just have to take the trouble to do it. And Amanda says, we'll prod each other to the mountain's crest. Quite right. That's absolutely what we're going to do. Now, I've really got to go. I feel my throat getting dry. It's probably time to refill on some tea before I lose my voice. I'll try to do a little bit more streaming. I particularly want to build things up on Rumble so that once the axe falls on YouTube, won't necessarily notice. So if you have not subscribed to me on Rumble, please do so. I'm Brigantia Blackbird there. You can just search my name. I will pop up for you. And just come on over there and watch me on YouTube by all means if you would like to. But, just know that when the time comes, and I think it will come, I'm already established on Rumble. Let's see. Amanda saying the same as church identity does not define her. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We cannot judge your faith by the deeds of, any of the churches, for sure. Oh, I tell you what, institutions have really had their day, haven't they? They are no longer worthy of us. All right. Thank you, Amanda, for hanging me out. Anyone who watches the replay, thank you very much. Very much appreciated. I absolutely forgot to put the link to the Gilded group onto here. But if you're watching on Rumble, you haven't subscribed, please do so. Please leave me a like. Please leave me a comment. And let's start getting this thing going. But definitely it for now. I'll see you guys later. Bye.